Welcome to Leadership Reimagined, where game-changing conversations are reshaping the world of work. I'm Janice Ellig, the CEO and founder of Ellig Group, Executive Search Advisors, where we are reimagining search through our long-standing commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. On today's topic, Leading Through Change, I am delighted to welcome Douglas Peterson, President, CEO, and board member of S&P Global, one of the world's largest provider of indices, including the Dow Jones and ESG Index. Doug joined S&P Global in 2011 as president of its credit ratings business and became CEO in 2013. Doug has repositioned S&P Global to power global markets with investments in AI, sustainability services, and a range of innovations in data, analytics, and benchmarks. Before joining S&P, he had a short stint at Chevron as a data scientist, went on for his MBA, and then spent 26 years at Citigroup as CEO of Citigroup Japan, chief auditor, roles in Latin America, and his last position as Chief Operating Officer of Citibank NA. Today, Mr. Peterson chairs the Bipartisan Policy Center's ESG Task Force and the U.S.-Japan Business Council, and is a member of the boards of directors of the Japan Society, the National Bureau of Economic Research, and a range of other organizations.
Thank you, Janice. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And you have had quite an impressive career. And the journey really started in your childhood in New Mexico, and then international study in South America when you were in college, and then to be a global corporate leader. And you have remarked many times, always remember your North Star. Describe when you started following that North Star early in your life and its impact on your career, and what it would mean for other people to have that North Star.
Thank you, Janice. It's great to be with you here today. And I'm going to go back to my childhood when my family stressed education as being so important. And that goes beyond just formal education. It's also learning from the people around you, learning from the circumstances. And my parents always were the first to arrive somewhere. They set up the chairs. They're the volunteers. And I've taken that with me my entire life. That North Star is to always learn, to always volunteer, to take the toughest job, because when you stretch yourself, you learn. And I've used that as my North Star throughout my entire career, that I want to learn something new every day.
And what was the impact of growing up in New Mexico? I mean, you're fluent in Spanish. You wanted to work internationally. You studied abroad. What was that impact of growing up in New Mexico for you?
New Mexico is a unique state because it has a multicultural history. It goes back way before the 1600s when the Spanish arrived and set up the first capital in the United States, which is Santa Fe. And I go back every year to see my family. It's where I have my roots. When I get there, I breathe a deep sigh of relief to be home. And the culture is so critical there. You have multicultural from the Spanish heritage, the Native American heritage, the modern art, the opera, the incredible cuisine and the food. And you have these wide, long landscapes. And what it did for me, especially having grandparents who, some of them had come from immigrant families and others had been in the United States a long time, all of them had a quest for learning and knowledge. But it opened up my interest in international business and international pursuits. And when I was a kid, I used to listen to the radio and see how far away I could find a radio station. And I'd find one in Chihuahua, Mexico, and I'd be excited about hearing something in Spanish. And it was this quest for knowledge and culture is something that really drove my interest in having an international career.
That's really interesting. So what did that mean for you as a leader, both at S&P, but also prior at Citigroup? Really a lot of international roles from Japan and then banking in 100 companies, and how you lead today and where your focus is.
Well, when I think about how my leadership skills developed, I almost go back to starting. You mentioned that I worked at Chevron right after college, and I was a data scientist. And my job was something where I was helping build models for global oil markets. And that actually started my interest in global markets and how I could start getting interested in finance. And that's why I went and got my MBA. But I think about different phases of my career. Early in my career, I built skills in technical skills, finance, financial modeling. Then I built great skills in relationship management, which is something that is, I believe, really critical for a successful CEO. I learned about credit. I learned about enterprise management. I got experiences in mergers, in finance. I ran the audit function at Citigroup for a while. But what really started changing my thinking about leadership was in the late 1990s, I started taking a step back and saying, well, I want to be a student of leadership. I want to understand what differentiates people from being managers and being leaders. And I developed a model which I've carried with me ever since, that has 4 parts. That a great leader must have a vision, which means you're providing direction. You must have integrity, and beyond integrity, you have to have values. You have to have accountability, which means that you're always going to be delivering. You're going to think about what it requires to deliver. And then you have to have communications, and communications is the glue that brings things together. And it was all of these experiences, being overseas, it was working with different cultures, working with different people, where I developed this model. And then since then, I've continued to evolve it. But those are the 4 anchors of how I think about leadership.
So, when you first started at S&P Global in 2011, you were president of the credit ratings business. And there you had a 100-day plan meeting with everyone in the ratings business. Is that what you do today, too, in terms of those listening tours and understanding what people are doing in different countries and the different parts of your business?
I do. And I think you use the critical word listening. And when I joined what was at the time McGraw-Hill and the Standard & Poor's rating services, I knew a lot about the business because I was a client of the ratings business, and I knew a lot about McGraw-Hill and the businesses there. But I said, I don't know enough to be an effective leader. And I put in place a 3-part plan. And the first was to get to know the business. I wanted to understand the financial drivers, the products, how the businesses work, the actual in and outs that you would need to do a business review. The second was I wanted to understand the external environment. And this was really critical because at McGraw-Hill and at Standard & Poor's, there were not a lot of people that had experience in the financial markets and dealing with regulators. So I thought about, well, who are those external constituencies? It's the clients, it's the regulators, it's the media, and you need to have those relationships in the good times and the bad times. One quick example, I met a client, a very large fixed income investor, and I spent an entire day with them. And I told them, I'm not here to sell, I'm here to learn. And I spent the day walking around their offices, learning from people all day about the many, literally hundreds of different ways that they use credit ratings for benchmarking, for decision making, for analytics. And it was such a powerful day for me to learn. And then the third element of my learning assimilation program was meeting with the people and learning the culture. And I did that through town halls, through floor walks, through roundtables. But something that I do, which I call a day in the life program, I still do that. I did it this week at one of the new businesses that came with our IHS Markit merger. I spent a day, and what a day in the life is, where I sit with people at their desk and I learn about what they do, and I see things. And I've always learned things from that. I get to know the people better, but I also learn more about the business. And sometimes I find things that don't work. And for the CEO to be sitting with somebody and you see something that doesn't work, it gives you an opportunity to go fix things and make an impact. But this was my plan: learning the business, learning the external constituencies, learning the people and the culture. But the way I learn the people and the culture, at the end of the day, one of the most fun things is a day in the life.
That is a really interesting feature of your leadership that I think more should do, because so much happens on the front line. I know even in my own business, when I'm saying, why are we doing that? When you sit with somebody, you really see the nuts and bolts and you say, we need to change that, or that's a great idea. Let's do more of it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So your people must love that, have that impact that they can make. Now, you've got 40,000 employees. Is that right? Around the world?
We have 40,000 in 36 countries.
And talk a little bit about how S&P Global has evolved, because I said in the beginning, it really was more of a publishing company, had some ratings, but what is it doing? What was it then like? And now what is it like, given also the acquisitions you've done and the focus that you have on data analytics, AI, and fintech? You are a big fintech organization. Tell us about that evolution.
Yeah, when I first joined the company, we were McGraw-Hill, and we were a traditional publishing company that had acquired companies 50, 60 years ago, like the Standard and Poor's businesses, and which included ratings and indices, and Platts, which was a commodity insights business. And they had put together some fantastic businesses, but of that publishing conglomerate, it included businesses that had really changed. And when I joined 12 years ago, there was a huge divergence between traditional publishing that relied on advertising and paper, and that model was changing. And then the financial data businesses, which needed to have a lot of investment in technology and speed. And when I joined, the business was already starting to be separated. After I became CEO, I completed the sale and divestiture of all of the traditional media businesses and concentrated on businesses that what we call power global markets. They're the products and services, whether it's data, it's analytics, it's research, it's benchmarks that allow people and increasingly systems to make informed decisions about trading, risk management, strategy. We have a ratings business that provides credit information to the markets. We have an index business providing S&P 500, Dow Jones, and others. Our commodity insights business is providing benchmarks like the Brent crude oil. We have a data business called Market Intelligence that provides desktop services and some kinds of back office and processing services. And then finally, we have a mobility division. So across all of these, the common factor is that we're a data company, we're an intellectual property company, we protect our intellectual property, and we've seen some really large trends over the last few years. One of them is sustainability and ESG, and another one is digital transformation, which includes AI. And then the capital markets around the world are changing, and we're shaping the company following and actually leading in these really big secular trends.
So, what does this mean for your customers? For the world at large in terms of protecting the average consumer?
When we look at the products and services that we provide, we're trying to provide independent data which people can use to make a decision. We're not telling anybody what's right or what's wrong. As an example, the S&P 500, which people rely on, there's a methodology for defining what are the 500 stocks which are going to be in the S&P 500, and it becomes the benchmark that defines what is the market. And individuals can invest in it through an ETF or through a mutual fund. And we're not saying you should invest or not invest. We're giving you a very transparent, very clearly managed and articulated set of 500 shares. You're going to know exactly what they are in the morning and exactly what they are in the afternoon. And you can invest in that at a very, very low cost. And so that's an example of a product where what we do is provide transparent information that people can use to make decisions and manage their portfolios. Same goes with something like a credit rating. We're not telling you if a bond is good or bad. We're just telling you what is the probability that it will default. And there's a lot of people that like to buy bonds that have low ratings because they have high returns and they want to be playing on the upside or getting a high return. So we're not saying if a bond is good or bad. We're just telling you what the rating is of that bond. So across the board, our approach is to provide independent, transparent data that people can use with confidence to make a decision.
Very important role for you, and a lot sits on your shoulders. Now, you've done some expansion, you acquired IHS Market. Why was that a good fit with S&P Global?
Yeah, this was something I just mentioned a little bit about some of the large trends that were taking place in the markets globally. And as I mentioned earlier, I like to, and as a company, we like to really look around the world and see what's happening with macroeconomic trends. What are our clients' needs? What are some of those needs we think are evolving? And we had purchased an AI company 5 years ago called Kensho, which helped us improve our data management, our approach to thinking about the way data was shifting around the world. But a few years ago, we took a step back and said, what are the biggest trends? And I mentioned those evolving capital markets, which include Latin America, Asia, starting to have much bigger capital markets, Europe shifting to capital markets, people shifting from active management to passive management, energy transition, sustainability and ESG, and then digital transformation, which now includes AI. And we said, if we want to have the right scale and the right approach and be much more, move faster, have more innovation, we need to invest in these areas. And we could either do it on our own organically, invest our capital. We could find some small companies that could fill in gaps, or we could look at the market and see if there's a partner that would fill all of these gaps or most of these gaps or these opportunities. And we identified AHS Market. After we identified the IHS Market opportunity and began the conversations, we found that there was a great fit culturally with the businesses. It's not a lot of overlap. It's much more complementary. That was one of the biggest advantages of the merger, was it was a complementary deal, not a synergy-driven deal. And after we announced it, we named an executive committee and immediately started working on what were our values, what was our purpose, how are we going to think about the organization structure. We couldn't manage each other businesses, but we had a period in between the announcement and the merger where we set out a framework for how we're going to lead the company with our values, which are integrity, partnership, and discovery, so that the day the deal closed, we had a leadership team in place, we had the next level of management, we had a strategy, a culture, values, and we were able to roll that out and move incredibly fast with our execution.
Well, I heard a lot of people had to have running shoes though to keep up with you. So you made it work. Congratulations. Tell us a little bit about your role in terms of some standardization when it comes to ESG and some confusion about what is ESG, and how does one measure it and how do companies compare? What's your role there?
Well, first of all, you're absolutely right. The ESG and sustainability is an evolving area, especially for financial markets. And people care about the environment, they care about social issues, and the markets actually spend a lot of time evaluating governance. And what we see is that it's a field, though, when it comes to the data and the markets themselves, it's new. It's something that's evolving, and it's something that will require some standardization. So at S&P Global, we're working on ways that we can provide standardized products. But at the same time, something that I actually enjoy working in policy areas, and it's something where we can bring a lot of value. I've worked with a couple of different groups. One is with the Bipartisan Policy Center on an ESG task force that they have. 3 years ago, when the G7 was in the UK, a task force was put together to come up, is called the Impact Task Force, to come up with some ideas of how you could measure and value and look for sustainability for financial markets and look at the impact. I put together a task force of global players, which included the banks, insurance companies, asset managers, the big four accounting firms, regulators. And we began to work over about 5 months to look at what was the state of sustainability information for the markets. And we identified areas where you could have more transparency, more consistency, both at large corporations as well as for small and medium enterprises. And at the time, there was a new organization evolving called the International Sustainability Standards Board. And we recommended that the ISSB, as it's called, become the standard for financial markets. Fortunately, since then, the ISSB has had a lot of success. It's merged 3 or 4 organizations together, so it's eliminated some of the alphabet soup. They recently launched 2 new standards to create a common language for climate-related risks and other opportunities. And then in July, the IOSCO, which is the International Organization of Securities Commissioners, endorsed the standards, which is really valuable because this is the equivalent of the SEC around the world, that they've now endorsed this as well. So as a company, we're backing the standardization and transparency. And as a person, I'm trying to help with different organizations I'm part of to help shape the policy.
So where are we on that journey? And what do you see the vision would be maybe in 3 years' time? Would there be standardization where people can really look to see where all companies, I know from a recruiter standpoint, candidates want to see the position that many companies are taking on different social issues, how they are on governance, and certainly what they're doing in the environment. So where do you think we'll be down the road?
Yeah, I think we're going to see this convergence of a combination of what is the policy world that I mentioned, the ISSB and IOSCO, these other organizations, which are starting to roll out more standardization. As an example, Japan has recently put out some standards for ESG reporting. Europe is working on standardization for climate reporting, and for the markets, the more there's consistency, or what the fancy word people like to use is interoperability across the standards around the globe, the better. But the reason this is happening is the people that you talk to every day that are interested in the purpose of the company they're going to work for and their commitment to the environment and to climate change and to social topics. That's what's really driving it at the end of the day. It's not that the regulators showed up and said, oh, we need to do this thing. It's that people care about this. And I see it with our own employees. Our employees are very interested and they want to know, what does our company stand for? And not just the products and the services and the policy we're doing. They also want to know, what is our company doing about it? Do we have programs to hire the right people, to train and develop people, to ensure that we have our own environmental impact program in our company? So it's the convergence of what the policy world is doing to help shape markets. And as I said, the financial markets can play a really positive role, especially if you look at the size of the capital that's going to be required for the energy transitions in the multiples of trillions of dollars. And for that capital to go into new energy grids, into batteries, into energy, new energy sources, et cetera, that's going to require people to understand how that's going to operate, how it's going to be successful. And then at the same time, you've got the people that really care. So those are going to come together. In 3 years, we're going to see a more consistent approach around the globe. We're going to see more acceptance for the language, for how companies talk about it. So I'm actually quite optimistic that we're going to see the markets driving this, and the regulators and the policymakers are going to come along with it.
And that, leads me to where you are in your own company in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. You recently have changed the title for your CHRO, your Chief HR Officer, to Chief People Officer, and now Chief Purpose Officer. And Demetra Manis is your individual given those responsibilities. Why did you do this? And what's the importance of it in terms of for the company globally? And what message are you sending to the people at S&P Global?
When I think about being successful as a leader, I talked earlier about one of the pillars of my leadership style, which is communications. And communications is two-way. It's listening, but it's also presenting a really compelling opportunity for the employees. And I felt that the CHRO role many times is focused on process and compensation and benefits. And I wanted to elevate the role of our CHRO to be thinking about inspiration and motivation and bringing an opportunity that every single person felt like they could be developed, they could learn, and they could grow, which was different than worrying about benefits and compensation. So I changed the name of the role from a CHRO to a CPO, Chief People Officer, and went to the market and found a partner, Demetra Manis, who is absolutely phenomenal at helping us bring this approach to developing leaders in the company, and every single person in the company knowing that they have an opportunity to grow and they can be a leader in their own right. And we took that role and we've been very successful with it. We use some language in the company that we say we put people first. There's always this argument in companies: does the client come first or does the people come first? And what we've said is our people come first and we're client centric. And we put our people first. We want them to have the benefits. We want them to have the opportunities. We want them to learn. We want them to grow. And when you have that cycle, it becomes a virtuous cycle, because then your clients also get better service. And we can put the clients at the center, but our people come first.
Doug, I'm so happy to hear you say that, because I've been a strong proponent of that as well. If you put your people first, then they'll put their clients first. Then the communities come first, and then your shareholders benefit from all of that, right?
Exactly.
And so even what you're doing with sitting with employees a day in the life of, you're really showing them they have an involvement, they have a purpose, they have an impact. And so now having a chief purpose officer, I think, is a term that we're probably going to see more of. And when we recruit CHROs, we may make that recommendation that it become the chief purpose officer.
You know what? Let me follow through on that. You mentioned the chief purpose officer. I talked about the chief people officer. When we did the merger with IHS Markit, I expanded the role even further. I forgot to mention that, to call it the chief purpose officer. And so that role now goes beyond just people and includes the linkage of communications, of brand, of the community, of our role of DEI, our diversity role. So all of that now is under Demetra as a chief purpose officer. It started with the chief people officer, and now we've expanded it to include all of these areas that are interconnected to inspire our employees.
Yeah, and I think in the age of AI, that's going to become even more important, isn't it? So people know that, they may not be right for this job anymore, but you'll reskill them and put them in something else with purpose.
Exactly.
I also want to commend you on what you've done with your board, with having 5 of your directors of the 13 being women. So you're really moving the needle there as well for greater diversity on your board, your C suite, and throughout the organization. How has that made a difference having more women on the board in the decision making process, the overall dynamics, impact of the culture? Why is it important to have gender diversity on boards?
It's important that the tone starts at the top because the people in an organization look to the top to see how are you behaving, not just what you're saying, but what are you doing. And so from the first day I became CEO, we started thinking about the future of our board and how our board is going to reflect the markets around us, but also become more diverse and very specifically bringing more women on our board. When I first took over the board as a CEO, we had one woman who was just leaving and another woman on the board. So we went from 2 to 1. We're back now to 5. But I have a couple of interesting observations about it. The first is we only had one woman. She was the one woman on our board. When we had 2, we had 2 women on our board. Now that we have 5, we have 5 women, but at the same time, we have 2 engineers, we have 3 bankers, we have 3 cyber security experts, we have 2 people from California, we have 2 people from Europe. And those categories, which start defining the way the board works and the skills and the expertise we have, aren't necessarily always just the women. They're the 2 engineers, one is a man, one is a woman. The bankers are a couple of men and one of the women. And the definition of what the roles and what people do starts expanding in a way that it really benefits for the diversity of the dialogue. And one of the areas where we probably benefited the most from the diversity of our board was during the pandemic. And this was an area where getting the input from our board and having people that were living through the pandemic in so many different ways, it became a critical sounding board for us. And that's where I think in some ways I saw the diversity paying off even more than ever.
You have been leading through change, made many changes. What's ahead for S&P Global? What do you see on the horizon? More M&A, more organic growth, deepening in your businesses in certain areas? What's ahead for you?
We haven't talked about AI, which is definitely one of the areas that's ahead for us. But right now, our number one job is to continue to execute the very large merger that we did last year. It was over $40 billion. Our shareholders expect us to deliver with the discipline we always have. But since we're doing so well and we're moving so fast, it allows us to think ahead again and dream again. I mention AI as one of those areas because it allows us to rethink some of the ways we interact with our customers, to come up with new ways to create the value. I talked before about providing confidence to our clients to make informed decisions. Well, the AI can sometimes make that go faster, smoother, link data that's never been linked before. So AI is clearly on our panorama. It's one of the most important areas. Another is looking at what we talked before about sustainability. Sustainability and energy transition, as we said, is just starting to get built into the financial markets. We want to stay ahead of that. We're investing in those areas. Energy transition is one that in particular is valuable for our company because we've got businesses in commodities and financial markets and equities and fixed income. So we're going to provide the data there. We're going to be investing a lot more in sustainability. And then finally, international expansion is something for us. We want to be global. S&P Global, the name global means something. It means that we want to provide information to someone about all asset classes everywhere in the world. And there's a lot of activity happening in Asia and Southeast Asia, in the Middle East, in Eastern Europe, in Latin America. And we want to make sure that we have the best coverage of the entire globe. And that's going to require us to also do some more innovation and some more investment.
Well, you did spend 6 years living in Tokyo, right, as CEO of Citigroup Japan. And you talk frequently to upcoming leaders about the importance of having a global mindset. Is that something that everybody, we always sometimes are just so focused on the US and we try, but do we really incorporate all that's going on overseas? Because the risks there are what you're evaluating as well, correct?
A global mindset is critical because there's not much you can do today that doesn't have some sort of a global or international component to it. At the most basic things, the clothing we wear, the products we consume have come through a supply chain which might have started in Latin America with a commodity. It might have gone to Asia to be processed, and then it went on a ship somewhere that was using oil that came from Saudi Arabia, and it ended up in the UK, where then it was distributed to the US. You can't do anything on the product front that doesn't have some sort of a global supply chain around it. And when I think about the businesses that we're in, which is data and analytics, and we're helping the supply chain of capital around the globe, capital is global, capital flows and people flow. And you need to understand cultures because you need to know what are the different cultures, how do people make decisions, how do they work, et cetera. When I was in Japan, I was there for 6 years. It's a very special place. I have dear friends there. I have former colleagues who I've stayed in touch with, and we have a lot of clients there. And Japan is a major global center of innovation. It's a large integrated trade economy. It's the second largest investor in the United States, and it's maybe one of the most important strategic alliances for the US. And so I've learned so much from that, and I'm able to continue to stay very close to Japan as I am in other parts of the world. But I think having a global mindset means that you're building the bridges to better connect the world to make sure that it's always a better place.
And that's a really good leadership role for everybody to hear, because if we trust each other, we speak to each other, we work together, we buy from each other, we sell to each other, there's a real partnership. And that's really what you're building there, and understanding what other cultures need and want. Parting words, Doug. We could go on for a long time about everything that you're doing, because it is a fascinating area, and it's a critically important to the risk management of the world. As I look at what you're doing in data analytics, AI, sustainability, and this transition. Parting words to our audience about what you see ahead, leadership advice to others, how they can be better at what they're doing, and how they can aspire to what you're doing today.
The fundamentals of leadership haven't changed, and they're always based on a foundation of respect. But today, communications have changed. People expect a very open dialogue. They expect more listening, and you need to do that listening. During the pandemic, we were doing town halls for employees every single week, and I was meeting every single day with our executive committee because this was like a crisis. And that required us to step up as leaders. And even when we didn't know, we needed to admit we didn't know. So this communications is so important. As we've mentioned a few times throughout this call today, people expect that we have a purpose in life and that our organizations have a purpose because they want to follow people that know where they're going and they want to know what that purpose is. The last few years, the leaders have really had to embrace the idea of partnership. And we saw that with public-private partnerships, with the development of vaccines, what's happening with infrastructure. But I want to end with something which for me was really important, and a lesson about leadership that I learned during the pandemic. And that was that I had to take care of myself. And it's always was easy to be on an airplane and fly somewhere and think I was a road warrior. But I realized how important it was for me to get sleep, to have a good diet, to exercise, to be healthy. Because at the same time that you need to lead an organization and you need to be providing this North Star and this vision, you also have to take care of yourself. And I found that by taking care of myself, I actually think I've been a better leader because I feel healthier, I'm more confident, and it's been something that for me was one of the most important lessons of the last few years. But where I started, the fundamentals haven't changed. It's about respect, it's about communications, it's about providing people with a vision. That's what's really critical with leadership.
Yes, and you have an incredible reputation for being a leader that people do trust. And if you read the Edelman 2023 survey, business, not government, but business, is what employees trust more than anything else, than news media, than government. It's business. So you, as a purpose-driven leader with the vision, the values, the accountability, the communications, the transparency with your people, and also in terms of how you're running the business of S&P Global, truly makes us all more comfortable in terms of the risk management that is happening in the world because of your indices and your ratings and everything that you're doing to ensure good decision making on the part of all of your clients. So I thank you, Doug Peterson, CEO of S&P Global, for your insights today and being a great supporter of DEI, which I am so so focused on, but really always making the right decisions for the right reasons at the right time. So thank you for joining us today. A very insightful discussion.
Thank you, Janice.
And thank you to my listeners today for joining us with this incredible story from Doug Peterson, CEO of Leading Change at S&P Global. You can find me on Spotify and our website, www.elliggroup.com. Stay tuned for the next episode in another month for game-changing conversations, Leadership Reimagined.